Welcome to NVAHA's Lunch and Learn. We are so fortunate today. We really wanted to take this opportunity to tie together an important tracking tool that we have and tie that back to your collective advocacy and support for housing policy and resources here in Northern Virginia. So today we're going to explore how the Housing Indicator tool tracks local jurisdictions' housing production and preservation in our region to help stakeholders create paths for removing obstacles to opportunity and supporting housing stability. We'll also connect those regional indicators to our recent local budget outcomes for FY 2027 with the NVAHA team sharing updates on how jurisdictions are investing in affordable housing across Northern Virginia. So we hope this gives you a succinct snapshot of where we are in our region and the need to keep advocating for additional policy tools and resources to help us achieve our goals. So without any further ado, we'll go ahead and welcome back Courtney Battle, Executive Director of Housing and Leah Hendy, Principal Research Associate and Co-Director of the National Neighborhoods Indicators Partnership at Urban Institute. So Courtney, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Jill, and the entire team. Really appreciate the opportunity to share more about the Housing Indicator tool this afternoon. And with that, I will jump right in. As Jill mentioned, I'm the Executive Director at Housing and if you're not familiar with us already, we're a regional membership collective that serves as a convener, educator, and activator of individuals and groups across the housing ecosystem, working to advance our region's housing affordability challenges. And very pleased to present to you today on the Housing Indicator Tool 6.0 and just grounding our session today in the latest data that we've been able to pull together. And it's not just a data set, it's really how we align across jurisdictions, across roles, across perspective on what's actually happening in our region. And the latest update to the tool builds on that foundation, bringing in new data that just helps us to see not only where we are, but where pressure is building and where action is needed most on housing affordability. So before we get into those specifics, just want to take a few minutes to level set on the goals of the HIT, and then we'll move into the data. And hopefully everyone can see my screen at this point. Okay, perfect. Okay, so at its core, the housing indicator tool does four things. First, it serves as an accountability tool, tracking our collective progress towards housing production and preservation goals. It also functions as a policy resource, showing what strategies are actually being deployed across jurisdictions. And it's also designed to drive action, so creating clear entry points for engagement across the housing ecosystem. And importantly, all of this is grounded in an equity lens, connecting housing outcomes to broader disparities that we see across the region. And again, this isn't just about the data, it's really about how we use this data to inform decisions and move the work forward. So, where it began, before we look at where things stand today, I think it's helpful to step back briefly to see how this work began. So, in 2019, the Urban Institute released a report examining the Washington region's future housing needs. And that analysis found that between 2015 and 2030, the region would need roughly 374,000 new homes to keep up with growth. And importantly, more than three-quarters of those homes would need to be affordable to low and middle income households. So, in other words, our housing challenges throughout the region aren't just about building more housing, but really about building the right mix of housing. And that finding helped catalyze a broader regional conversation. That same year, the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments, or COG, worked with planning and housing directors across the region to adopt regional housing targets that were focused not just on how much housing we need, but also where housing should be located relative to jobs and whether it would be affordable to people who need it most. That resolution also emphasized that meeting these goals would require collaboration across governments, nonprofits, developers, philanthropy, all of these different groups across the ecosystem. And the HIT was born out of um, this perfect storm happening to really develop, or excuse me, track that progress towards these goals over time and provide a shared source of data for the region. So uh, that is a little bit of history on kind of where we started. So where we are now, HIT 6.0 includes an expanded geography, includes Greater DC, Baltimore, Richmond, as well as new state level dashboards for Maryland and Virginia. And there's also more granular accountability built in through annual, regional, and jurisdictional goals. In thinking about how we leverage the tool, we've kind of grouped it off into a few different buckets. So, one, it provides understanding, you know, showing how your jurisdiction is performing on housing production, preservation, and things of that nature. It also supports advocacy. It informs which policies are being utilized and what's missing or where those gaps are. And then it also educates on, how race has shaped our region's housing policies, among other items. So before we get to the numbers, just want to quickly walk through some components of the tool and how it works. So there are both regional and jurisdictional dashboards that is really one of the most powerful aspects of the HIT and allows us to move beyond anecdotes and look at housing trends in a very clear and measurable way. And the regional dashboards provide a snapshot of both housing outcomes as well as policy adoption across Greater DC, Greater Baltimore, and Greater Richmond. Users can compare those jurisdictions, track progress over time, and identify where policies are moving the needle and where those gaps still exist. Similarly, the jurisdictional dashboards also include those housing trends, housing outcomes, and policies, and they take the analysis a step further by allowing the user to really drill down into individual communities, knowing that each jurisdiction has a very different housing market, different pressures, different policy environments, and the HIT really helps to make those visible. So this is actually one of my favorite features of the tool that really exemplifies who can afford to live in the region. And it makes the data very real. It connects it to our lived experience. So you'll find this on the landing page that allows you to really put a human face to the data. The faces are electronically generated, but the facts are very real. You can hover over each person there to see their demographics and toggle who is priced out and not out of housing. Alrighty, and moving on to the policy toolkit. So this was designed to really help jurisdictions move from identifying housing challenges to implementing solutions. And you'll find this on each dashboard. Um, but it organizes policies around three core strategies, which are to preserve existing affordable housing, produce new housing, and protect residents from discrimination and displacement. The toolkit really allows users to see which policies jurisdictions have already adopted and where those opportunities still exist. And it also helps highlight best practices and encourage cross-jurisdiction learning across the region. Importantly, we know there's no single policy solution that will solve the housing crisis. There's no silver bullet to this, but it requires a coordinated mix of land use, financing, preservation, and other strategies. And the goal is really to provide policymakers, advocates, and other stakeholders with really practical, actionable tools that can help advance housing affordability at the local and regional level. All right, so moving on to calls to action. Housing challenges cannot be solved by any one sector acting alone. We're very cognizant of that. And so we've really tried to tailor the tool to include calls to action for all of our stakeholders across the entire housing ecosystem. So whether you're a developer, a lender, policymaker, employer, a healthcare institution, or philanthropic partner, there's really a role for everyone to play in advancing housing affordability. And the HIT is intended not just to diagnose those problems, but to encourage coordinated action. Housing impacts economic competitiveness, workforce stability, public health, educational outcomes, and quality of life, which means all of us have a stake in those outcomes. And lastly, what is new on this version of the HIT? The HIT has evolved significantly since its original launch, but the HIT 6.0 continues that evolution by incorporating new zoning, new policy measures, as well as the Maryland and Virginia state level dashboards. And I know that Leah will share more on those. This growth really reflects both the increasing complexity of the region's housing challenges and the demand for more actionable, transparent housing data. So with that, I'm excited to turn things over to our research partner, Leah Hindi from Urban Institute, whose team has really been instrumental in helping shape and strengthen the HIT over the years, and incredibly grateful for their partnership. So Leah, I will give you the floor.
Thank you, Courtney, and we value your partnership as well. Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know Urban Institute, we're a nonprofit research organization that was founded on one simple idea: to improve lives and strengthen communities, we need policies and practices that work. That's why we try to equip change makers with evidence and solutions that is grounded in verifiable real-world analysis. And we're thrilled to continue to help support the HIT, as we are dedicated to serving our home region through our Greater DC initiative, which I can share a link to that in the chat after we're done. And before I get to the results, I do want to thank my colleague Nina Russell, who did all of the data work this year, and the staff too at our local housing and planning agencies, who really do put a lot of time and effort and add their expertise in sharing this data with us. If you want to go to the first slide with the graph, Courtney. So overall, both the Greater DC and Baltimore areas saw decreased production last year. And cumulatively, since HIT data collection began in 2019, the now 16 jurisdictions in the Greater DC area, because we added Manassas Park this year, have produced nearly 160,000 units, 70% of which were multifamily. In comparison, the 5 jurisdictions in the Greater Baltimore area who are reporting data for the HIT have produced more than 21,000 units since 2022, but a much smaller share of multifamily, only 41% there. On the next slide, we've seen the increasing attention, as I'm sure you all have, at the state level from both Maryland and Virginia to accelerate housing production. So we did tabulate all the data this year, as Courtney mentioned, for those dashboards by state. So when we say state, it only includes the jurisdictions that are actually participating in HIT data collection. It wouldn't represent any outside of that. This graph shows you the total units completed for jurisdictions participating. The District of Columbia alone accounted for 26% of all units reported in the HIT. The 11 jurisdictions in Maryland and 9 in Virginia participating cumulatively each counted for 37% of units, with Virginia jurisdictions producing slightly more than Maryland, about 600 more. The next slide. This one compares the 2025 production of new units against our estimated annual need for new units to meet the demands of household growth by 2030. So the Greater DC jurisdictions are in blue, with Greater Baltimore in gray, and the yellow bars represent the regional averages. So Greater DC at 94% of the goal for 2025, and Greater Baltimore at 73%. The city of Falls Church produced well beyond their goal, as did Manassas Park and the city of Baltimore. Altogether, 8 jurisdictions produced at least 85% of their annual unit goal, which is down from 10 that did so last year. Oh, we're on Maryland. Can you keep going forward? Yeah, that one, thank you. Looking at just the Greater DC area on this slide, for production for the 7-year period from 2025 or 2019 to 2025, the region overall was at 91% of the target of about 25,000 units annually, and jurisdictions above the 91% are in blue on this graph. 7 jurisdictions exceeded the cumulative production targets, which were the city of Falls Church, Manassas Park, Arlington, Alexandria, DC, Frederick, and Montgomery. 5 jurisdictions, Falls Church, Fairfax County, Manassas, Montgomery, and Prince William, all increased their percent of the cumulative target that they had been met over last year's numbers. If you go to the next slide, using rolling 2-year averages, so we're removing some of the year-to-year noise, we took a look at the trend and the number of units on building permits. So there's some variation in who's reporting from year to year, but the average for the whole capital region, including Baltimore, DC, areas, fell about 20%, from more than 25,000 units for the 2022 to 2023 period to about 20,000 units for the 24 to 25 period. This slide shows the 8 jurisdictions with the largest volumes of units permitted and their trends over time. And all of these lines use the same y-axis so that you can compare across them. You can see there is some variation in these 3 data points across jurisdictions, with Arlington, DC, Frederick, and Prince William all experiencing a decline over the whole period, while others have trends that are more mixed. Now, switching over to affordable housing, this slide shows the production of new committed affordable units over time. Jurisdictions reported more new units in 2025 than in past years, with over 5,800 units. That's up more than 400 from 2024. And while this does represent a significant level of production, it falls well short of the need, as households across the area continue to struggle with affordable rents. Cumulatively, though, the greater DC region has produced 22,800 committed affordable units since 2019, substantially more than in the Baltimore area. Go to the next slide. This year, 68% of affordable units across the capital region were affordable to households with incomes at 50 to 80% of the area median. And this was down from last year's share of 74%, which means that there is actually a larger share of units produced at deeper affordability levels this year. So there were 23% or more than 1,300 units affordable to households at 30 to 50% of AMI, and 9% or over 500 units affordable to households with incomes below 30% of AMI. And of these committed affordable units, 31 units in the greater DC area were set aside for permanent supportive housing. DC again produced the most affordable units of any other jurisdiction, with over 2,400, followed by Montgomery County at 978 and Prince George's County at 467. Looking at the pipeline for affordable housing, we asked jurisdictions to report the number of units in their development pipelines or that were under construction. In 2025, there were nearly 28,000 units in the pipeline or under construction. And to be considered in the pipeline, they typically have a preliminary plan approval or have received a funding approval from the jurisdiction. So this year, we wanted to explore the trends in the development pipeline, again, presenting those rolling 2-year averages from 2022 to 25, and all charts using the same axis. You can see that Arlington, Fairfax, and Prince George's counties all have fairly flat trends, while Loudoun and Alexandria are increasing, and DC, Frederick, and Montgomery County are decreasing. And now moving to preservation activity. For the HIT, we look at both activity for units with existing subsidies, which is blue on the graph, and affordable units, which were previously unsubsidized, in yellow. And we know preservation is such a critical tool in our region with the high cost of building new units. So across the area, there were nearly 6,300 units reported preserved in 2025, with 30% being previously unsubsidized. 9 jurisdictions reported preservation activity, as shown on the graph, with DC and Montgomery each preserving more than 1,000 units. Fairfax County and the cities of Falls Church were the only Northern Virginia jurisdictions reporting any preservation activity. And this graph shows the number of affordable units reported as preserved since 2022, representing nearly 20,000 units, 63% of which were affordable units with existing subsidies, while the rest were unsubsidized and then are now preserved as committed affordable units. You can see that the preservation activity within the different areas that the HIT covers fluctuates from year to year, but cumulatively, Greater DC accounts for 15,300 preserved units. And as Courtney talked about, we really need a portfolio approach to meet the demands of this housing crisis. So we tracked 24 different policies for local jurisdictions because we know all the tools will be needed, and we need policies in all areas to preserve existing affordability, produce more housing, and protect people from discrimination and displacement. So this slide highlights 9 of them. One of the new policies we added this year was accessible production tracking. And here we're talking about the physical accessibility of the units, and tracking that really helps jurisdictions understand whether new housing meets the needs of residents with disabilities and older adults. And local governments can use that information to identify gaps in accessible housing supply and develop targeted policies to increase the production of units that serve these populations. Thus far, 5 jurisdictions reported tracking accessible production at minimum for the committed affordable units. Another new policy we added to the dashboard this year is single stair reform, which involves updating the building code so that multifamily buildings of up to 6 stories are only required to have 1 stairwell instead of 2. And evidence has shown that modern buildings with a single stairway are just as safe during fires. Moreover, single stair apartment buildings can be constructed at a lower cost and provide more floor plan options, which potentially increases the viability of infill development. The only jurisdiction to formally have adopted this reform is the city of Baltimore, though the DC Council voted on it earlier this month. This year, we also have revised our definition of housing trust funds to clarify dedicated revenue sources. They must have a substantial and regular revenue source that does not rely on annual appropriations, and 9 jurisdictions reported having those funds. But we're going to dive in a little bit more detail on those. While only 9 have dedicated revenue, 20 reported having a local housing trust fund. And for those who reported both the FY25 and FY26 budget allocations for those, we've graphed them on a per capita basis using jurisdictions' 2024 population, so then that we can compare them a little bit more easily across jurisdictions of different sizes. In FY26, trust fund budgets ranged on a per capita basis from $4 in Baltimore County to $142 in DC. DC and Arlington do stand out, providing over $100 per capita in both budget cycles. Alexandria, Montgomery, and Richmond allocated at least $50 per capita in FY26, and 7 jurisdictions, including 5 in Northern Virginia, invested between $20 to $50 per capita. And I'm excited to hear your updates on the FY27 budget process. We also asked how they're using their local housing trust funds to preserve, produce, or protect. 13 jurisdictions reported using their fund for production, 9 for preservation, and 11 for assisting renters or homeowners. The most common specific use cited was for gap financing with 13 jurisdictions, followed by assistance to homeowners with 10, rehab with 9, and acquisition with 8. One of the policies we introduced last year was zoning for housing variety. Residential zoning that allows a wide range of housing types ensures that people of various ages, incomes, and cultural preferences can live in a jurisdiction. Promoting variety means that jurisdictions have zoning that allows for duplexes, middleplexes, middle density housing, and larger multifamily development on at least 25% of residential land. So on this chart, the 15 jurisdictions in the top 2 bars, which have less than 75% of land dedicated to single-family housing, have zoning that allows for some variety. Having flexibility in housing types enables developers to produce more housing with the same fixed costs, increasing affordability and variety of new units. 7 jurisdictions are doing more to facilitate multifamily development. Special exception and discretionary review processes, which may require developers to undertake additional negotiation and public hearings outside of what is written in the zoning code, increase review time, costs, and risk in housing development. So having clear by right zoning standards that enable multifamily development to go through a standard administrative review in a timely manner make for more affordable housing. And 7 are doing this with at least half of their multifamily projects in the last 3 years proceeding by right. So on the graph, you have the number of jurisdictions for each category and the share of multifamily development applications that included a special exception or discretionary review process. 3 in the DC area, DC, Arlington, Prince George's, as well as Anne Arundel, Howard, the city of Baltimore, and the city of Richmond all had half of their multifamily projects proceed by right. But for 13 jurisdictions, at least 75% of their multifamily development applications required additional review and procedures. Dense residential development around transit increases the number of residents who can access jobs and amenities without increasing traffic congestion as much as development in other places. So clustering housing around transit reduces development expenses while improving transit ridership and investment returns. Jurisdictions that allow multifamily development on at least half of residential land near high-capacity transit stations are considered to be maximizing transit-oriented development. And we count high-capacity transit as including those for metro rail, commuter rail, light rail, bus rapid transit, or streetcar. Only one jurisdiction, Alexandria, reported 75% of land within a half mile of high-capacity transit permits multifamily housing to be built, but 7 more had 50 to 74% of land. That's Arlington, DC, Rockville, Gaithersburg, and Manassas Park, as well as Anne Arundel and Richmond. But 11 jurisdictions have less than half of land within a half a mile zone to allow for multifamily housing. And then we added one final new policy to the dashboard this year, which was no parking minimums. Eliminating minimum parking requirements can lower project costs and allow developers to right-size parking to what residents need. Only 2 jurisdictions, Richmond and the city of Baltimore, report having no parking minimums at all. However, 11 do have some reductions possible near transit, as well as 9 who are allowing reduced parking necessary for affordable housing developments. So as the regional economy remains uncertain and interest rates and construction costs high, we do think there's more jurisdictions can continue to do to help incentivize overall housing production, as well as affordable housing production by updating their zoning regulations and regulatory processes to help reduce project costs, speed up development, and allow for denser housing in more places. So I'm looking forward to hearing the conversation about the budgets.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Courtney and Leah. There is just a tremendous amount of data and work at the HIT tool. I would highly suggest that you spend time, dig into it a little deeper. There's a lot to unpack. You guys did an amazing job trying to boil it down in like the first 25 minutes. So thank you for doing that. And thank you both for the amazing work that goes into it and all of your local government partners, as you mentioned, Leah, who take a lot of time to make sure the data is correct and that you're able to kind of compare apples to apples best that you can across all the regions. So well done and thank you. And we really believed here at NVAHA that your presentation on the HIT tool would just really be an amazing complement to our updates on the local budget, letting you all know we have so many advocates on the call about your influence on the budget process to get additional resources for affordable housing. But as you heard from Leah and Courtney, it's also a lot about the policies that we kind of work on and advocate for throughout the year. But we did want to make sure that you understood that we are trying to track all of our shared goals for affordable housing development and preservation. And to protect residents as well. So this is a great way to kind of keep abreast of these changes that are updated on an annual basis and usually released in the spring this time of the year. So thank you again for sharing that. So our NVAHA team is going to go through, I think you all know that each of us kind of oversee a local alliance in each of the 5 major jurisdictions. So we wanted just to present a very high level local budget outcome from FY 2027. So we'll go ahead and get started with that. I get to go first as the Prince William County Director who passed their budget on April 21st. You will get copies of these slides, so don't feel like you need to take notes, but I do just want to point out a couple of high-level pieces of information. Prince William County had really made the goal a directive really from the county executive and the board to contribute $5 million a year to their recently created affordable housing reserve fund. So the cumulative reserve investment so far from FY24, when the Affordable Housing Reserve Fund, which is also known as a trust fund in other jurisdictions, has been $21 million since FY24. For the first time, Prince William has issued a notice of funding availability that came out May 1st. I believe it's due July 1st for $16 million in that affordable housing fund. And I know they are looking for great potential projects from affordable housing developers to hopefully apply for that. And they've done a lot of outreach and education around what their NOFA looks like and what the Affordable Housing Fund guidelines are. Um, and just overall, they did vote to decrease the real estate tax rate from, you can see there, from basically 0.906 to 0.865 per $100 of assessed value. There was a lot of conversation in the county about the burden on homeowners on the tax rate. They voted to increase the computer and peripherals tax, and that tax is usually what data centers pay, and that increased from $4.15 to $4.50. We talked about the Affordable Housing Fund being set up, and we do anticipate that their Office of Housing and Community Development will make those awards this fall. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Amanda Corin, who serves as our Loudoun Alliance Director. So thank you, Amanda.
Thanks, Jill. Yeah, I'm just going to talk a bit about Loudoun County's FY27 budget. So the Loudoun's budget for fiscal year 2027 was approved by the Board of Supervisors on April 7th. Loudoun's budget remains relatively strong compared to its surrounding jurisdictions, largely due to tax revenue from the data center industry. In this budget, the real estate tax is the lowest of our Northern Virginia jurisdictions. The vehicle tax rate was lowered, and the budget request of $2.1 billion from Loudoun County Public Schools is fully funded. The FY27 budget includes $29 million for the housing fund. This includes the dedication of a full penny of the real property tax, 20% of the fund balance from excess local tax funding, and revenue from a local cigarette tax, specifically for homeownership programs. For some context, last year, Loudoun County increased its contribution to the housing fund from a half penny to a full penny of the real property tax, and this year's budget will maintain that level of contribution, that full penny. The FY27 budget also includes 4 new positions within DHCD, the Department of Housing, to support loan financing and housing programs. That's just a quick high-level overview. I'm happy to take questions at the end of the conversation, but now I'll turn it over to my colleague Anika, who will talk a bit about Fairfax County's budget.
Thank you, Amanda. Always a hard follow after Loudoun. For Fairfax, we have affordable housing investment. As many of you know, on May 5th, the Board of Supervisors approved the FY27 budget markup. This included the quarter penny for which is 8.8 million dedicated affordable housing, bringing the county's baseline investment to approximately 52.7 million annually. When I thank all the advocates for pushing for the full 2 pennies, even though we didn't get our 2 full pennies, we are still happy with the progress. There was also tax reduction. The board lowered the real estate tax by 1/4 cent, which went from 1.1225 to 1.12 per $100 of assessed value. That for the average homeowner, this reduces the projected increase in annual tax from $357 to $337, which is a $20 difference. There was also an allocation of $3.38 million for a transformation of extended stay hotel into the Fair Ridge Family Shelter. This initiative really helps keep the vital lifeline to families experiencing homelessness and reflects compassionate, solution-oriented, human approach. And then we also have the economic and housing support. There was new positions added to support economic competitiveness in the housing initiatives, which cost largely offset through existing resources. There was also some program restorations. Partially funding is restored for a couple of things. One, low and moderate income home repair pilot at $250,000, part-time preschool program at $200,000, home delivered meals at $130,000, and then Be Well health support $310,000. And then there was also reserve strengthening. There was $4.7 million put aside to reserve for economic uncertainty, prepared to potential revenue of cost and pressure. That's pretty much it. Thank you. And I'm going to pass it on to Hannah, our NVAHA Deputy Director for Alexandria.
Thank you so much, Anika. I appreciate that. So for Alexandria, City Council adopted the budget on April 29th, totaling approximately 979.1 million following the final add and delete process. The city maintained the real estate tax rate at $1.135 per $100 of the assessed value. On affordable housing, the capital improvement program includes 1.6 million for affordable housing investment, and that number comes from three main sources. 6.4 million from the dedicated meals tax revenue, 4.2 million from the real estate tax dedication, and 1 million tied to the city's affordable housing commitment, and that's connected to the Amazon HQ too. The council also added 558.5 thousand for rental assistance through the add and delete process. Of that amount, 458.5 thousand is funded by the additional revenue from BPOL and 100,000 from the revenue reestimate. The council also added 83,000 in one-time funding for Healthy Homes Action Plan. That funding supports work connected to housing quality, health, and stability for economically disadvantaged residents. The largest housing issue that we see is the affordable housing pipeline in Alexandria. Staff estimates that more than 100 million will be needed to address the existing pipeline. There is also a more of an immediate funding gap. There are three ready to proceed affordable housing projects that need about 7 million beyond the planned funding for this current fiscal year. So while they're maintaining their dedicated housing investment, adding into rental assistance, the available resources are still well below the level needed to move the current pipeline forward. So with that, I'll go ahead and pause and turn it over to our Arlington director, Alice Hogan.
Good afternoon. Arlington County approved their budget on April 22nd, and you can see high level, there was a small increase in the tax rate. There was a tiny increase in our AHIF, which is our dedicated housing fund. And then the housing grant, which is our local rental assistance program, was capped for the first time. So you can see that our tax rate is $1.053 on the every $100. Our total budget in Arlington was 1.7 billion this year. And the Affordable Housing Investment Fund received 11.14 million, which was a little bit more than last year and about half of the prior year. And then our housing grant program, which is locally funded rental assistance, went up by a few million, but is also going to be capped, and they're introducing a waiting list. So that's a new and unfortunate policy that they had to put into effect. So during the budget hearings, it was presented by the staff that the projected need for AHIF funding is close to $500 million to meet our projected needs and in the goals that Leah was discussing earlier. So along the bottom, you can see the small increase in AHIF, and then the grants were capped. There was 450,000 provided for opportunity grants to 30 different nonprofits in the area who provide various social services to our neighbors. And then there was a $350,000 flexible fund called Humanitarian Assistance, which is primarily going to be going to legal aid to those who cannot support themselves in that effort in these immigration times, as well as food security grants at 150,000. And then we had a planning position that was on the chopping block, but gratefully they did freeze the position instead of eliminating it. And then we did have 2 housing locators to assist with folks coming out of shelter into transitional or affordable units. And one position was grant funded and not refunded by the county. So we will see how that goes. So that wraps up Arlington as well. So I think, Jill, it's back to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all for that update. I want to quickly thank our advocates that came out and testified during the budget process in the 5 jurisdictions and beyond. Thank all of our local government staff who really work hard to put those budgets together, and finally our elected officials who had hard decisions this year. I think in most of our jurisdictions, it was a really tough budget year, and we certainly have concerns about what next year will look like as well, but we were able to make some progress on additional resources for housing. So thank you all. I want to just turn it back to our Q&A now for all of the presenters, and I wanted to so feel free to continue to add questions here in the chat, and thank you, Leah, for answering some of the questions as we went along. Um, I did want to start with a question about programs that help respond to NIMBYs and debunk misinformation that's often repeated by those who are anti-development. So I will first ask Courtney and Leah if they know of any programs, and then NVAHA has an update about our toolkit that we've been working on. But first, let me ask Courtney or Leah if you know of any other jurisdictions who have tackled this in the region or other parts of
I can't think
Baltimore.
of one specifically offhand, but maybe Courtney has one, but I would love to hear them if they exist.
Yes, agreed. A very similar answer there. I think that's an ongoing challenge across the region, and something that we're thinking about um, quite deeply at Housing and continuing to. And so happy to explore partnerships and any opportunities on that front, but have not seen anyone successfully, you know, eliminate, eradicate, address that issue, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, it's definitely something that at NVAHA we've been working on in partnership with a lot of our other stakeholders and advocacy partners. So I'm going to let Anika Rahman talk a little bit about our affordable housing toolkit messaging framework that we've been working on, and just give us an update on where that is. So thank you, Anika.
Thank you, Jill. So we at NVAHA, this really came from an idea that Mary from NAACP has suggested. When we had passed a successful project at the Franconia government site, we thought about what are some other ways we can achieve more projects like this. And we came up with a guide to do's and don'ts, but like what are the pitfalls and what to avoid. And then we saw it growing from Fairfax Group to wanting it in Northern Virginia. And then we presented this, we created a 10-chapter guide that includes different industry, different perspectives, different professionals who exist within the housing space beyond just those who are residents. And we presented this at the governor's conference last year and realized the need is so big. There was such enthusiasm that we expanded to all of Virginia. So really, that helped us get 15 more authors. And when I say authors, these are partners, allies, and nonprofits and other organizations. We have real estate, everybody you can think of within the housing industry. And it's been really successful. I serve part-time on NVAHA, for those of you who don't know. So it is such a big undertaking that we're working on getting grant to hire someone to work on this, dedicating their time. But it's really exciting. The 10 chapters have already been drafted. It's really just working in adding more voices, tweaking them, and making sure we have them ready. I don't know if Joe, we missed anything, but happy to share with any of you who want to be included in that process as a partner to be a voice.
Yeah. And if I can just add one thing that also came to mind too, we're actually going to be partnering with ULI over the coming weeks on a technical assistance panel. I should have started there on addressing NIMBY. And so we're looking forward to all of the thoughts and insights that come out of those working groups on, how we could be working together as a region. And happy to share those outcomes as they're available as well.
Thank you, Courtney.
That's fantastic. That's really great to hear, Courtney. I know those technical assistance panels have really been really transformative for projects, but I love the idea of tackling something more broad too. So yeah, please keep us posted. We'll have you back, share information. So thank you. I see Mary Payton's hand up, and I know she kind of helped formulate this idea. So Mary, do you have a question on that
Yeah,
topic or something else? Go ahead.
sure. I just wanted to add two things. NACP, we're continuing to, and we need to talk about this soon, uh, do a more narrowly focused NIMBY guide for Fairfax and just limited to that, to the NIMBY issues. But a lot has shifted. New approach, and many counties are based on state laws that make faith community by right, housing by right, and the notion of taking away all the public forums, or many of the public forums where NIMBY's challenge affordable housing could be good or bad. I think it's interesting to look at that and see how it works. They may come out with the pitchforks in different forums if the public hearings are reduced. But anyway, there's a whole new process being implemented at Fairfax County that I think is really worth looking at and writing about. So we'll be talking about that in terms of public participation in affordable housing. I mean,
Thank you, Mary. And just to clarify those who, I know she was in and out, we do have, for our NVAHA guide, we do have one chapter on NIMBYism, but Mary is working separately on a core toolkit just for NIMBYism and advocating it, toolkit on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and Anika, I might add to that. I think one of our goals is to have a large document that is adaptable or tailorable to a jurisdiction. So once this exists, then each community or set of advocates can go through it and see how those suggestions or strategies best fit their community and their political situation. So hopefully it will, become specialized within communities.
Thank you, Alice. And the final thing I'll add is really this guide also, when we share different perspectives, we learn like a lot of professional industry folks are like, we wish the people knew this part. We wish they knew about this difficulty. So this is really to create also empathy among different housing struggles that we experience within our profession.
Great. Thanks so much for the update. And we will keep you posted on both Housing Ands Initiative with ULI and also our toolkit with our partners. There are some great, I guess, work that's been done for the DC region with Tiffany Manuel. That was probably pre-COVID days, I'm guessing, but it was some great information about communication and messaging around housing, how to make it more when you're trying to communicate more about an investment in the whole community and not just helping out one single person, but helping our region and our communities grow more equitably. And we'll put that in the notes that come out after this too, because I think that's been helpful for some partners. Okay, so some questions. I know there was some questions about the building code and probably more specifically around single stair reform in Virginia. Thank you, Mark and Bruce, for noting that, yes, the Virginia localities have to enforce the building codes that are part of the state. But maybe Northern Virginia Northern Virginia Affordable Housing Alliance, along with many of you, participated in the Commonwealth Housing Coalition, and one of their priority legislation was a single stair reform. So I don't know, Alice, if you want to add any more about that. You said it might be updated this year, so didn't know if you wanted to share anything else.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on it by any means, but as I understood it, it was passed as a concept in the General Assembly, and now it's in some committee or a commission where they're working out the final details and the implementation side of it. So if all of that goes well, I believe it's supposed to be, something that communities could start to implement in their own jurisdictions this fall. So.
Great. Yeah, that's amazing. I think maybe it is going to the Housing Commission for further study, but I do think there's progress being made there. And I didn't know, Leah or Courtney, the jurisdiction that does allow that now. Do you recall who does? I think there was one or two, maybe.
Single stair reform?
Yes.
The state of Baltimore passed it, I think, like last year. It's not been around long.
Great. Okay,
And DC
good to
has
know.
legislation that the council has voted on, but I don't think it's been transmitted to the mayor yet.
Okay, super helpful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. We'll look into our neighbors to the north here. Okay, so thanks for answering a lot of the questions in the chat. I know there were questions too about waiting lists for affordable housing, which those who develop the housing and work in our local government partners, we know that there are really extensive waiting lists because the demand outpaces the supply. Yeah, and thank you for Alice for sharing about the waiting list for the Arlington County housing grant. So I don't know if you have data on how much that waiting list is or how long that is or what the need, if they have projections about
Yeah, so
Arlington.
it's been an open program, just taking applications as needed over the last 15 or 20 years. It's been a long time. But as we know, the need has grown more and more, where it was about 5 or 7 million a year. This year it's 19 million. So I think the county board was just feeling like we have to get a handle on that expense, unfortunately. So right now there's approximately 1,700 households that utilize a housing grant. And I think the average is around $500 or $600 a month to support their rental contributions. And so those will be capped as of October 1st. And then anyone coming in after that will have to get on the waiting list, and they'll wait for attrition as people come off of that need, which is very low. So it will, it's going to be very problematic for our most vulnerable folks who really rely on that local funding to be able to leave a shelter and rent somewhere. So we're first time ever, so we'll see what happens, but it's not great news.
Do residents have to apply annually for the Arlington Housing Grant?
They do have to recertify, but once you
Okay.
have one, if you continue to be eligible, then it's yours to continue to use. So
Great, thank you. And I saw that Ivana from Fairfax County put in that the Fairfax County housing wait list will open on June 1st. So I think that is for FCRHA units that might be open. I don't know, Ivana, if you can add more, put anything else in the chat. I know you usually push out that message, and we'll include that in our newsletter as well. But that is really just, okay, great. So this is for their project-based voucher wait list for units across the county, and it's, only open, it looks like just for about a week. So yeah, so that is for you to really get onto the wait list. So it doesn't guarantee that you'll get placed, but they just are able to open up their wait list from time to time. So we'll make sure we get the word out about that. Thank you so much, Ivana. Really appreciate it. Um, any other questions? I know there was some conversation in the chat about the cigarette tax at Loudoun County, which is new, which I think, thank you, Hannah and Amanda, that it's, I think, up to $3 million that'll be used for the Loudoun County's affordable home ownership program. So I do think that's something I hadn't heard of, at least in the Northern Virginia region, that being used. So very interesting for those of you who want to explore it in your jurisdictions too. And I think there's a statewide tobacco commission that is actually also using some of the state money for housing too. So we can get more information about that and send that out too, because I remembered that was interesting for me to learn about at the state level, the tobacco commission having some resources to potentially share with housers. Any other questions for our speakers? Okay, well, I do again want to thank so much. Oh, Anna, please go ahead. Anna Rickling, go ahead and just come off mute if you want.
I actually have a question that relates to an issue we're working on right now in Fairfax. And and this is maybe a beginning of a broader conversation, but does NVAHA consider assisted living or long-term care, not nursing care, but also, a little bit after you're able to live fully independently? Do they consider that housing?
Um, yes, so we definitely consider that housing. I know trying to get affordable assisted living has been a priority of many of our jurisdictions. It's so challenging, obviously, because of the high cost of the supportive services that are needed. And sadly, we saw really only existing subsidized affordable assisted living uh, units at Culpeper Garden actually move out of that assisted living model into independent living because they could not sustain it. It was just such a huge expense to keep that going. So unfortunately, it's a nut that I don't know if anybody's been able to crack. I know there's been statewide legislation by Delegate Reeser in Loudoun County who's tried to encourage the like inclusionary zoning to
Yeah.
address assisted affordable living too. And I
Yeah.
know that hasn't passed, but I think there's work trying to be done in the state too. But happy to talk more about that offline. I know it's a priority for City of Alexandria and all of our jurisdictions really
It's
struggle.
just there seems to be a debate internally if it is housing, right?
Interesting.
So, and therefore, which agency or party is in charge of kind of tracking the affordability of those facilities, which we know are very, very expensive and all of that. So I didn't hear it mentioned in the budget updates, but yeah, I'll talk to you more about it. But thank
Okay.
you for having the opportunity.
I think in the data world, it might not be considered housing.
Okay.
Because those are group quarters versus housing units if you're talking about a facility.
It's a bed versus a unit. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So in
equals
this like ACS data, they're not counted when we're talking about housing units if they're in a group quarters um,
you're
environment.
living there. That's the roof
Yeah.
over your head. So
Yeah.
It is interesting. Arlington is beginning a task force that I'm part of, looking at that also. And I don't know the specifics. It's so tricky because jurisdictions and then state, and there's so many aspects of who's giving the services and who's assisting with the rental. And as far as I can tell so far, it seems like if it's like assisted living and not nursing home, we are considering that in Arlington housing. Whereas, that you have your own unit and it needs subsidy because you can't afford the rent and then the services are coming in. That's what was happening at Culpeper Garden before they struggled for years and years, and they were getting underwater. They had to close down that program. But if others on this call or in the community, it wouldn't be bad if we heard what people are thinking about in other jurisdictions. So maybe folks, be in touch with us. Perhaps we could have a brainstorming or see if a wider task force would be helpful.
That's great. Thank you so much, Alice. And thank you to Adam, who put in the piece about the per diem reimbursements not being high enough in Virginia, but they are in DC. So that's interesting. I didn't realize that. So, all right, great. Well, we'll circle back for a group conversation with all of you. I think our best lunch and learns are when we're answering our own questions in the chat. So really appreciate everybody's participation with this and really want to thank once again Courtney Battle with Housing and Leah Hendy from the Urban Institute for sharing your HIT updates, and to the NVAHA team for the budget updates as well. Great. And thanks. Alexandria is going to reduce their report too for the part of an age-friendly plan. So thank you, Mike, and we'll see you guys next month for the next Lunch and Learn. Take care. Have a great day.